Others talk to our times towards an ethnography of a self-poisoning mind. So yesterday, I felt at the end I'd been too hard on the notion of identity. And really, I think if I was thinking about it slightly more carefully, and not going off on a rhetorical, I would say that identity has a threefold root. And there's one I loathe. And the other two, well, one you can't help, and one is useful in the right context. And they're all quite different. They're distinct in their own little way. They share various similarities, is what I'd say, and I'll go through them. So the one I was having a go at, is what I would call the moral identity. That's the one that demands that it is, and that you respect it, and that it must always be. And yet, it, and whatever rights it's asserting, can only see those rights as they are reflected in others' eyes. And so that's that very modern, very nationalistic idea that I demand you see me as English, sir. And I'm prepared to slaughter half a continent and starve the other half in order to demand that you do. Or all its modern incarnations, where folk get on their horses and demand their rights as the white working class or the whatever. And all of that, all those demandings, the reflections that we demand that other people make of us, that somehow conform to who we are, understood rightly, should be fitted within a theory of morality that simply doesn't work that way. You simply can't talk about the kind of rights that it's demanding on that level, because they don't really exist like that. I'm a good Kantian that way, I suppose, or for that matter, Leibnizian or Spinozian. Morality, and I like the word morality. I know it's a bit controversial, but I do like it. Its first move is to do without identity, even for Kant, because the categorical imperative is followed by everybody. Doesn't matter who they are. It's my big breaking point with Hume, out of interest. Hume always thinks that you have to create the very notion of identity in order to have morality at all. But that's because he's really talking about ethics, which I'll come back to, and doesn't draw many distinctions between them. And he's also doing it because he's annoying the Puritans of his day, who are certainly playing identity war games in the names of morality. And this is, of course, identity wars that cursed morality, as it became caught up in demanding that other people see you as you wish to be demanded. I mean, the biggest identity warriors are, of course, the fundamentalist Christians, who demand that you see them as good and redeemed, in spite of all appearances, and demand, because of their God, that you see them in a certain way. And always have done, always demanded that their morality is somehow something that you must honour and reflect upon. That's one side of identity, which I have absolutely no truck with, and is clearly one of the engines of nationalism, one of the engines of every murderous struggle that humanity have engaged for the last, certainly since the Industrial Revolution, since Napoleon. Endless identity wars. But there are two other forms of identity. The first is the kind of one you get that you find at the end of Hume, in Hume's first book, the end of the first part and the beginning of the second part. This is the identity you get just because you always do things at certain times. It's the identity that you are inside. So, for instance, I have certain habits. At any one time, you might say, my particular identity is defined by a very relatively tight set of habits. My friends know that they can predict where I am and turn up because I always do things at exactly the same time. So at the moment, I wake up at about 5. I don't get up till about 6:30. I don't want to wake anybody else up, and I do French for an hour and a half, because why not? And then I go for this walk, and then I do gardening, and then I do this, and then I do that. And I have a totally rigid structure. And my identity exists inside that structure. I am that which is doing that structure. But it changes. 10 years ago, when I had a very energetic Springer Spaniel and was teaching a hugely ambitious teaching program, I used to get up at 4:30 and walk the dog, because he needed to walk 5 hours a day in order to calm down enough to be docile, so that anyone else could live with him. And over the course of the life, I've had various different sets of habits. I'm sure you are the same. We're very much hobos, as Deleuze might say, of wandering across a plane of immanence. You set up your pitch, you establish your habits, you live a life. And then there are the slower habits. I have things I always am. I'm always writing silly fantasy stories. I'm always going for overly long and unfeasible walks. And I'm always understanding the world in terms of just doing it face to face. So you have habits that are long established, that you say that you incur inside. And all of these, I would be internal to them. Oh, I can do the Humean thing, if I really must. I could become proud of a random set of them and form an identity based on that pride. Of course you can, you always could. Or a shame based on a certain set, if I must. But the habits would exist irrespective of that. They are my identity, if you must. But I would say my identity is that which is inside them, really. Any feeling that I am of myself is inside the habits and not the other way round. Again, they're little empirical cells, difference in repetition. Little moments little fragments of things I might call myself. And there you get them, whether you want them or not. It's just part of being alive. But Foucault very clearly talks about a different sort of identity, the ethical identity. And it's worth comparing the ethical and the moral. The moral demands that others see you as you wish to be seen. The ethical, its first move, is the other way you could do that fold. It's to see yourself from outside and to understand and to look upon yourself as if you were external to yourself. A move, he says, occurred first within Greece, a folding over of power, so that you don't understand yourself merely as an empirical self pitched up within habits. You try to moderate those habits. You try to understand who and what you are. You experiment with other ways that you could be, other thoughts that you could have, other dreams. This is, for me, I mean, again, it doesn't matter if for me. I would certainly want to argue that this was always worthwhile. Ethics, understood as the way that you treat yourself as an object to be understood across a life. An object to be partially trained, to be investigated, to be thought through, without navel-gazing over much, is clearly a vital part of post-Greco-Roman humanity. It's how we manage who we are, what we are. We understand ourselves to be objects. We live a life, and in that life, we try to be the best or the worst we can be, or just what we want to be. Modifying bodies as we desire them to be. It's within the entire ethics of, the entire sphere of ethics, I would put most trans identity. It's an ability to rethink how you understand what you could be, and to try to live it as you can. It's an ethical thing, a looking from outside in, and understanding yourself in terms of how you would look, how you would think an external observer would think you, which is always a challenge. It's always a challenge to which you have to respond, because that external observer is always challenging. And of course, such identities have huge problems. I personally avoid them, which is why identity can easily feel a very negative word for me. Why? Oh, because my external monitor, the one looking at me, can get itself set on hypercritical. Anybody quite as odd as I am, I mean, whatever symptom you want to label me with, because I never get any better. Acute scruffiness. Can't have anything other than an incredibly vicious external observer. So I tend to have slight problems with ethics. Oh, I follow it. I try to be ethical. I try to moderate my behaviour as I would wish it to be others to do it, or that do as you would be done by stuff. Absolutely. And all of that is only conceivable as you understand yourself to have an identity, and that identity is formed from the way you think of yourself from outside, the way you look at what you are as if you were somebody external. Not then a demand you make on others, but on a demand that you make upon yourself. And understood like that, why not? Why not have an identity? I would think it was a mistake to necessarily say that you are still one identity, one person, one set of ethics, because there are clearly lots of different ways you could do it. The way that I ethically think, whether I'm scruffy or not, very vicious, is clearly very different from the way I ethically get myself up in the morning and get myself out and thinking. And yet there is a sense where all of them are kind of ethical things, because they're kind of understanding how I wish to be, the person I wish to grow into, how I wish to change what I am, understood as if I was external to myself. But I wouldn't say that the two identities that I am creating, the scruffy urchin I always am, and the ability to get up at 5:30 in the morning to do French, are necessarily part of the same identity even. They're certainly not part of the same habits, not necessarily. And they're not necessarily part of how I understand, the way I understand myself externally doesn't have to fold me into one fold. It can carry me into lots of different ones. It's a philosophical point, but the point is about identity, is that it isn't unified in itself. I can contain many things that will feel like identities. That is, cogent wholes by which I am changing that which that which is created by the fold, and giving it a history, a life chance, changing what I am. And yes, because I have one life, I might say, well, that gives you one identity, one chance. You can only be this set of jiggly-jaggly things. To which I would say, yeah, all right. But that fold, the ultimate fold of death, the existential ethical fold, I must live an ethical life because I must live towards death, always strikes me as a good Spinozian as stupid. I'm going to be just honest with you, it's stupid. Yes, of course it is true. Yes, of course, Heidegger is right. In the end, you die and you reel away unthinking. But there is a side as you are alive, that life, and I'm going to use another Deleuzian phrase, the anonymous force that animates it, has got nothing to do with death. Your theory, the way you are, the way you have identity, is a fold in your life, not in your fold in your death. You could imagine you stand yourself beyond your death if you like. You could be like John Chivery in Little Dorrit, who is endlessly writing his obituary notices. Well, really, it's his epitaphs. Absolutely, you certainly could do that. I think Seneca does the same. Why not? But actually, most of the time, with most useful identities, you're not standing beyond your existence. You're standing just a little outside your existence and trying to understand what you could become, how you could change what you are. And the point is that you're not dead, but rather that you're forming a complicated exchange between you and also you. You are changing, you're moderating, you're touching yourself. You're in that strange little loop where you are both the person saying we must do this and the thing that is responding to that. And that is a little loop, a little hoop of identity that is totally valuable. I wouldn't put it as, and if you want to live an ethical life, which really we all do, it is the way that you do it. It is the way that you train yourself, the way that you understand yourself as something that is in training. Because ethics is not something we're born with. It's not something that's external to us, in a way that, in a sense, I would probably argue morality ought to be. Morality is always in the middle for another. It's always as you are caught up in other people's lives, in other ways that you are differing. Ethics, well, that's almost the middle with another. It's the way you're being inside yourself. You're existing inside yourself. It's perfectly possible to not do it at all, to have an a-reflexive life. It's perfectly possible, and people do these days, and that's one of the reasons that I think, for want of a better word, people of my age group often get uncomfortable with modern arguments like woke, is that we feel that they're not ethical, that they're they're confusing morality with ethics, so that they're demanding everybody else look at you as you wish to be looked at, rather than looking at yourself as if you were somebody external to yourself. The fold is in a different place. It's a moral fold, not an ethical fold. And yet it's applied upon the ethical standpoint. That's what makes it difficult, tricky. and problematic and leads to the identity war. You've mistaken how you've folded what it is to be yourself. And so, if I'm having a go at identity, it is about having a go at one of the modern ways we fold identity and how we misunderstand what that folding is. What we're really doing is an ethical change, which is about us and those who want to change like us, who want to be the same as us, of which there's always some. What we're not doing is making a big statement about other people, about demands, about how other people already see us, because that is a moral fold. So identities are complicated things. They're not one thing at all, ironically. I would certainly have a threefold route for the modern theory of identity, but I wouldn't necessarily stop at three. I've just thought of three this morning, because they're the three obvious ones. If I really put my head on and scratched a bit more, I would reckon I could probably get two more. One about unconscious mind and one about history. But I'm not absolutely convinced about that, and I haven't thought it through, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not saying then there are only three, but there are at least three. And when you are thinking, I am, always make sure you know which one you are.